The term Suraksha was something that possibly none of us in the insurance industry for the last 15 or 20 years would have probably spoken in the way currently it's being spoken, because all of life insurance right now is all about protection. And protection, when we started, when the life insurance was privatized, was possibly a small segment of the overall product offer that used to happen. And with this narrative of Suraksha by 2047 reaching every Indian is a subject of deep introspection, simply because there is a huge protection gap as we see in the industry. And the narrative of protection doesn't necessarily be confined to one particular sector of the insurance industry, but protection at large goes with health, goes with life, it also goes with the whole aspect of general insurance. And so when we talk about Suraksha, and when we talk about a nation, and when we talk about every single individual, every single person in the country, a truly secure nation is not just that protects its borders, it's one that protects its people, not just through physical safety, but is also about financial security, health resilience, and after all, with economic dignity. So when we look at India at 100 at 2047, our ambition must be to create a Surakshit Bharat, which means a protected Bharat, where every Indian, like the lady said a little while ago, from the remotest of the villages in India to the largest metro, is protected from life's uncertainties, not just a privilege for a few, but for a guaranteed benefit for all citizens. So when I say this is not just an insurance goal, right? It's not just about insurance. And whilst this forum is all about insurance at large, I think it's a national imperative, a shared responsibility, and an opportunity for collaborative leadership between policymakers, industry, as well as the regulators. So that's the large issue, that the context of where Suraksha 2000. Now let me go a little further and give you some basic analysis as to why we talk about protection gap, and why is it important, and what are the challenges that we see from protection gap. Now, if you look at the Indian penetration as a percent of GDP is well under 4%, far below the global averages of about 7%. So this gap is stark, especially amongst rural areas, among women, among informal workers, and amongst gig workers and small businesses. Now, why is this happening? This is largely happening simply because there is possibly a lack of overall awareness. And if you would notice that the insurance industry of late has been mounting a lot of campaigns around creating the interest and building the awareness as far as insurance products are concerned. There is possibly low trust associated with it, and compounded with the trust comes the aspect of affordability and the complexity of the nature of the products, and more importantly, the last mile access. So a combination of all this is possibly one of the reasons why the possibilities of the reach is not there, and therefore the gap as far as protection is concerned is extremely low. Now, what do we do about it, right? It's easy to say a Surakshit Bharat. It's easy to say access for insurance for all. It's easy to say enhance the penetration. It's easy to say lack of awareness. It's easy to say affordability, and a whole host of complex issues. And therefore, how do you start building a transformation as far as this is concerned? Now, if you really look at the evolution of the industry and what has happened, a lot of good things have happened. It's not to say that we are not there. We are almost there. To our credit, the regulator has created a vision of insurance for all by 2047. Now, Once you start establishing a clear vision and a clear direction in terms of what you want to do, the players around, the stakeholders around the ecosystem then start looking at what is it that we need to do to make that happen. The proposed composite insurance license that is being talked about, hopefully when it comes into place, and we will have a conversation around it after this keynote address, is in terms of what can it do to bring in synergy, what can it bring in to do simplicity of the way we look at things like affordability, reach, and so on and so forth, and how do we address scale from that perspective. Now, you will also notice from the changes that have happened, the government has been through its multiple schemes trying to make the larger ecosystem more inclusive through the schemes. Now, that's something which is positive as far as the whole insurance sector is concerned. And of late, over the last couple of years, you've seen the rise of mobile-based onboarding, the insurtechs, AI-powered underwriting, and a whole host of transformative processes where technology is started to play a big part in the entire growth of the insurance industry. So while these are promising strides, they're essentially only the starting point, and therefore the real work lies ahead. And so some attempts to look at possibly what is the way forward, how do we reimagine the reach and inclusion of, if you're talking about a Surakshit Bharat at 2047. First is coming from a standpoint of policy, and what is it that we can possibly look at enhancing the policy as well as the ecosystem collaboration around us. Now it's important, there has been a conversation that's been going on for a long time in terms of how do we develop a unified insurance framework, right? That brings together the entire stakeholders in looking at if we have to reach the 2047 mandate of a higher for insurance for all, how do we start playing in? So there are some measures that are already taking place, and different insurance companies have started adopting different states, and in terms of making sure that not just you're making awareness of insurance products, but also working with those government bodies to ensure penetration of insurance in their respective states, right? How do we look at a co-investment model between government and private players to de-risk? Because one of the biggest risks from an insurance perspective is the ability to predict and forecast what could be the potential risks, and therefore innovation starts taking a backseat to the extent that we want to actually achieve, simply because the risks are still unknown. But if there is a model of de-risking from a government and a private player, then the ability to reach the insurance for all becomes that much more simpler. Again, it's a process of evolution, learning, and if you don't start doing it, things may start looking a little difficult. And with the digital transformation through your Aadhaar, your DigiLocker, and a whole host of other great national digital interventions that are happening, how do we look at leveraging this to simplify the journeys to the end customer and reduce friction? So these are some of the policy and ecosystem collaboration that we possibly have to look at. Then the second big thing is that whilst the traditional approach of insurance and enhancing penetration has largely led through multiple models of distribution, the question now arises that is that good enough to reach every single individual? And therefore it's important for us to understand, are there other ways that we can leverage to ensure that we reach the last mile? And therefore, can we look at all forms of customer interactions, touch points, and how do we collaborate with them to build awareness, and they become the first point of contact for ensuring that insurance sales happen? And again, I'm speaking out a little loud. I'm talking about post offices, I'm talking about kirana stores, I'm talking about social health workers, and so on and so forth. The possibility of reaching all cannot be done through the normal intermediaries that we have. We need to build some incentive models, therefore, to make sure that that is kind of taken care of. And I personally believe that we have to start looking at women-led literacy drives, because we have not done much. When a woman is protected, a household is protected. And I work with other multiple financial services company, and I understand the role women plays in actually deciding a housing loan, right? There aren't much statistics, but bulk of the decisions that take place for even taking a housing loan, the woman plays a large role. And therefore, I think there is a need for women-led insurance literacy drives, which therefore could have a large impact in terms of how a household is protected. The third aspect in terms of going forward is very clearly product and design innovation. I think technology can play a large role at one level, but when you're talking about mass scale reach and making affordable insurance product, then I think the whole aspect of looking at modular packs, looking at stackable insurance products, covering life, covering health, covering accident, and income support possibly becomes something that we need to discuss, think through. Also the aspect of micro premium, micro claim. Now these are possibly terms that we speak, but we do not do much. And therefore there is a need for us to look holistically in terms of understanding if I have to cover the gig workers, if I have to look at the rural households, if I have to go to the villages, if I have to look at some other people, how do I look at micro insurance products to make that happen? And more importantly, integrate insurance in every transaction that we can look at. The last bit is all about technology. Now, insurance is a business of trust, and therefore, how do we look at trust-driven technology, right? So it's important for us now to look at, and a lot of work is actually happening, a lot of companies have actually adopted, how do I look at AI and ML to improve underwriting? How do I look at AI, ML to look at detecting frauds? And how do we look at expediting claims? I think somewhere down the line, the whole aspect of customer service and customer satisfaction gets missed out dramatically, and therefore there is this fear of trust, there is this fear of money loss, financial loss, and therefore how can we look at the entire aspect of customer service and actually measure customer service as possibly a key differentiator in the whole aspect of how we look at protection. And lastly, I think there is also an issue from a technology perspective with all the attendant issues that we have in cybersecurity. How do we look at cybersecurity? How do we look at grievance redressal? And how do we actually build a transparency and foundational model as far as the business is concerned? So I can go on, but the whole aspect of the topic is in terms of protection, and therefore, where are we today? Where do we want to go? How do we want to go is possibly what I've just addressed. So let me leave you with this thought. If UPI transformed how we pay and Aadhaar transformed how we identify, then insurance must now transform how we protect. Yeah? And this is our next leap. Actually, if you really look at it, this is our next leap. This is our next infrastructure, right? And our next mission. And so when you say insurance for all by 2047, again, the narrative is if UPI has done something great, Aadhaar has done something great, how can protection become something great? And therefore, how do we transform insurance and how we protect becomes the big thing. The road to Surakshit Bharat at 2047 cannot be built by insurers alone. It must be shaped by policymakers, it must be shaped by regulators, technologists, educators, and a whole host of other people in the ecosystem. So let us not reimagine insurance as a transaction. Yeah. Very often we look at insurance as a transaction. Let us not reimagine insurance as a transaction, but a tool for resilience, a catalyst for confidence, and a promise of dignity. Okay? That's the way we need to look at insurance. The time, I guess, is to act now. The vision is clear, the journey is collective, and the destination, to my mind, is non-negotiable. And I think summits like this need to start discussing ways and means to address it, and therefore, in a manner of speaking, impact policy, impact decisions, and possibly look at new ways of doing things, because the biggest challenge at any point of time is to move from a time-tested, comfort zone ways of doing things to a more adaptive, learning agility, and trying new and bold things. That's the approach that we need to look at. So from the aspect of 2047, until we do that, it's possibly we'll be discussing a lot many things, doing incremental changes, but whether the incremental changes has a lasting, sustainable impact is possibly never going to be understood. And therefore, it's time for us from the insurance sector to look at how do we drive a secure, inclusive, and protected India, which therefore becomes a Surakshit Bharat for every Indian. I leave you with these thoughts simply because I thought I'll just touch the basic aspects of what it means. And I'm sure during the course of the entire day today, with the multiple deliberations on specific subjects, a lot of linkages could be added to every dimension of the keynote address that I'm speaking about. Thank you very much.